Episode 1. So we're here. This is podcast number 1. This is the Always Building podcast. And the Always Building podcast with Dan Ferreira and my co-host today, Casey Cunliffe. It's based on the scripture of Proverbs 24, which says that wise men are builders. They build families, businesses, and communities. And the way I interpret that is they're always building, but they're always building something. So it's meant to be a direct confrontation against the idea that you work and then you work and then you don't work, but because the Bible says you're always building, and you're just building family, community, or business, but you're always building. It's always intentional, even if it's rest, even if it's family, whatever it is. So that's what this is about. And we've recorded many times before, but this is officially the first episode. So thank you for tuning in. Thanks for being here, Casey.
So Dan, just to kind of open up, what is something that our viewers, our audience can expect from this podcast? What are you hoping to give them?
I'm hoping to give them the best and the hardest and the realest lessons that I've had the privilege of learning so far, and also the same from the guests. Mm-hmm. So my background is entrepreneurship, specifically in the built environment, whether it's manufacturing, building, design, engineering, these sorts of things, as well as full-time church ministry. I've am raising 5 children with my wife, Kristen. We've been married 20 years, and we've started 5 businesses and grown them, all different sizes and across California mainly. We've had the privilege of doing a lot of different things, and we've been through a lot of hard things too. And so this podcast is meant to be a devoted space to sharing the real hard stuff about life and the real wisdom that we've come up with or that we've experienced. And so it's got to be anchored in real testimonies and stories. So anybody who tunes in here is going to hear things about marriage, family, and business and community. And they're going to hear successes and failures, and they're going to hear basically lessons born of pain for the most part, and hopefully some amazing...
Those are the best lessons, Let's be honest.
I
like hearing about other people's pain, not going through my own.
That's the point. Actually, it was like, is there any other way to learn other than experiencing all the hard stuff? It's like, well, if we're humble enough, I think we can learn from each other. Yep. And so that's what this is meant to be, is an opportunity to do that. And also an opportunity, if you're going through hard things, to hear stories of people going through them on the other side, pressing through. I find myself lately, like, it's amazing. I'll see somebody going through something really hard, and I'll just run to them, and I'll sit with them, and whether they've experienced a loss or they're going through something financially or maybe persecution or whatever it is, and I'm just like, man, I just want to be there with them. So that's what this podcast is meant to be as well. Yep. And the other part is to set a standard of what life, how to live life with intentionality, and no smoke, no mirrors, no flash, no sizzle, no highlight reels of Instagram, just like real intentionality. Like, what does that look like? What does it feel like? And redefine what success looks like.
It's a lot less glamorous, isn't it?
It is a lot less glamorous. It is less. And one of the ways that I've stayed sane is actually to, as you know, like I kind of steer clear of the highlight reel altogether. It helps me stay grounded. So then you go, okay, shoot, if I'm not looking at someone's highlight reel online to try to get an idea of what I'm shooting for, then what am I shooting for, and who am I listening to, and so that's what this space is for. So I'm going to invite some of my best friends here, people I look up to, people that have done amazing things, are doing amazing things, or have gone through supernatural things, and share the stories and the wisdom. Okay,
so how much construction can we expect to be a part of this? Because you haven't really talked about building physically.
Yes.
But that is something that is a part of many of your businesses.
That's right. So the always building piece, the pun is, building physically. Right. Building relationships, building community. It's all building. And so, I spent a lot of years getting educated in engineering, architecture, means and methods of construction, project management, and then executing on all that. And so, that's a big part of my story, is how to build efficiently, effectively, high production, we've had staff, full-time payroll up to 150 people. We've had 30 projects running at one time. We've built we've built up teams and done pretty fantastic production things. And for a long time, I thought that was the goal, was to be the most productive, the most efficient, innovative machine team that we could do. And I think that there's an element of that. So I can't help but talk about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think people want that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll bring that too. I mean, we're not here to talk about the best practices of construction or manufacturing, but they're going to be part of this.
Definitely.
They have to be. Because one thing about building a community is you physically have to build it.
Right.
And to build it physically, you have to have people involved. So there's a relational community piece as well. And if you want to have a church, you got to build a church building.
Right.
If you know, so it all kind of goes together.
So what do you feel like is your lane in all of this? Because you can't be everything.
Yeah.
You're not a part of every single aspect.
Yeah.
Other people have to come alongside for, let's use your example,
Right.
building a community. So what do you think your lane is in that process?
I would say my lane's changed a lot, like most people over the years. When I started, I was a great tacticianer. I was executing projects with teams, contracts, financial accountability, legal practice. Like that's all the execution, coordinating labor, organizing material at really high levels, and that's great. And then as over the years, it's shifted into, okay, how do I build teams? How do I build teams? And now, where my lane is now is, how can we teach other people how to build structures that empower people? So my specific role now, even though I dip into a lot of stuff, is how can we with wisdom create environments that empower people to be their best? So it's not execution and it's not leading direct action. It's more of like designing ecosystem, designing structure that actually allows other people to grow and become who they want to become. And we were just talking about that before the podcast. Like that is sort of an elusive thing. It's a lot easier to build structures that control. It's a lot easier to build structures that are predictable. It's a lot easier to demand people fit into a box that you built for them.
Yep.
And, you know,
It's
that can
safer
be
that way.
effective. It can be effective actually, but it can't be sustainable long term.
Yep.
And so now I feel like the big question for me that I want to share with the people is, hey, if we can build things, you know, think about this. Why would someone want to spend 20 years working with you, 30 years working with you? They're going to be a different person every 5 years. And so we have this saying, you know, in our faith community here, that we want to see people after who they're becoming. We want to see them in through the eyes of faith. We don't want to see them after their past. This is a very difficult thing to do. And the only way to do it is to make room for them to grow.
Yep.
And you have to grow yourself. And a lot of that just means letting go of control. And so there's so many pieces of this. If you're going to let go of control, then what will be your guiding principles? It won't be control. It must be some value system that's really articulated well. So to build environments that empower and release people requires asking a lot of harder questions. And I think that's what this podcast is about, is like, how do you build a powerful marriage? You know, it can't be about I micromanage you or you micromanage me. It has to be about something else.
It's not?
It's not. I tried it.
I am still
I did it right.
testing.
Yes.
The jury's still out.
Yes. So that doesn't negate the fact that you have to sit down every week and sync your calendars and have a tactical alignment. But the thing that actually undergirds it all must be much, much more deeper and more empowering than just, you know, how do I get the most out of you and you get the most out of me? That can't be it. Even though that is part of what happens. It has to be about a deeper agreement towards something.
Right.
And that's in marriage, that's in business, and that's everywhere in life. And I think that's how you're always building, is you're actually always building more and more powerful environments.
Can you talk about a specific example where you're building an ecosystem?
Yes. So,
You have 5 businesses.
Yeah, 5 businesses. and you know, it's
Give us an
interesting.
example.
I have 5 businesses and I have 5 kids. So there's that. And we've built some things, we've sold some things, we have some things. So when each of the businesses we own is interesting. One I started when I was 27. Another one I started when I was 30. Another one I started when I was in my young 30s, you know, mid 30s, late 30s, now 40. So they all kind of reflect a starting point of where I was at in life at the time, my understanding, my best ideas, my best abilities to lead. And so they all have different challenges. Like the first one was the simplest one. It was general contracting. the whole thing kind of revolved around my quarterbacking expertise for a lot of years. And so for the first 10 years, like I quarterbacked that thing. I mean, I did all the, first I did a lot, then I eventually I ended up kind of settling into a place where I oversaw a lot of the business development and sort of the contract writing, even though that was done by others. So I worked myself out of a lot of the tactical things until I was in leadership, but all the other people executing project management, site supervision, self-performing labor, accounting, marketing, all the different departments, they still kind of rolled up to me.
Yep.
And so their MO was built on, I did the job before I gave it to someone else.
Right.
So they kind of fell into mimicking what I did, which was great. It worked, but it wasn't a true reflection of like a group of leaders. It was sort of like muscle memory. And so that's an interesting, this is a beautiful company, beautiful people, lots of loyalty. And, so for instance, the challenge with this company now, and it's an open conversation with our leadership, is how do we change from something that operates on muscle memory to something that actually has its own empower leaders to make decisions, resolve issues, grow the company, so it's not relying on me to walk in and say, okay, here's what we're going to do next.
Can I just be curious, because I just could be on the other end of this, being so curious, like, well, what does that mean? Can you give us even a specific example of how to say that? It means that,
like, in a lot of situations, so I have to use a lot of discretion not to solve problems with the team and let them bumble through solving them their own, which is hard on them. It's confusing for them. But without that exercise, they don't ever build up their own muscles,
right,
so that they can steer the ship and do what they need to do.
Are they aware that they're in this exercise?
I overtly tell them this is what we're going to do for the next year. So
don't hide that from them.
No, because it's scary.
Yeah,
it's scary. What if someone could tell you what season you're in right now? That would be amazing.
I would love that. Somebody do that.
Yeah,
Jesus.
Somebody do that. So that's what I try to do. Is I say, this is the season we're in as a company. This is where you fit into it. And I have a lot of dialogue, and I go, but it doesn't. You would think identifying the season and the challenge would make it a lot easier, but it doesn't. It doesn't. So now each person on the team in this situation, they have to opt into this process because it doesn't make it any less painful. Actually, that's interesting. It's like knowing what season you're in doesn't make it less painful. It just maybe gives you some awareness of like the purpose for the pain a little bit more. But I look back at some of the hardest things I've been through and was like, man, if I knew how hard they would be and how long they would go, I don't know if I would choose to go down that road. So
ignorance
maybe
is helpful.
Yes, maybe knowing isn't actually as good as you think it is. So,
yeah.
And I think that's God's grace to not tell us more than we should know, or we're going to hurt ourselves. So so it's a process. So in this situation specifically, we're taking a legacy business with beautiful people, loyal, hardworking, talented people who we formed a group that has been highly successful at times, and it was built around decision making that I had made primarily, and a structure that was built around my skill set and empowering people that way. And I thought it was a huge success because I wasn't tactically executing any day to day. But what I didn't realize is that it still was built around my own self. And so it wasn't like decisions had to go through me day to day at all. But it did mean that the company wasn't free to grow and become what it could be. Like I was the limit still. And so, so basically converting that into something that actually has empowered leadership that can really, really run is interesting.
Can I ask you a question? So some people, I mean, I could say this about myself. My husband and I have ran businesses. What if you actually find a lot of value in being like the buck stops here? What's the purpose of kind of growing yourself out of your own business?
I think, well, one, it's a journey I've been on. So I don't think everyone has to do that. I think, the way I see life right now is there's just levels and or layers, going deeper, whatever you want to call it. And so as you discover who you are and your talents, your skills, your calling, your season of life, you always have a choice. Do I want to continue to do the breadth of work I'm doing? Do I want to peel something back and prune? And like, for the sake of the analogy, biblically or physically, like if you're willing to prune, you can have way more fruit but you have to be willing to let go of some of the lesser fruit areas and really invest it all in more of a singular direction. Now, that doesn't mean you like put all your money or resources in one direction, but it does mean that you have to say no to good things so that you can have more time for great things.
Yeah.
And that is a really not talked about subject. Like someone comes to you and says, I want to learn from you or be around you or whatever. Like, oh, this is a good relationship. You're like, but if I say yes to this, I can't take my wife out on a date once a week.
Right.
Or something like that. Like, so you're like, they're both good, but I have to decide what's great. And I think, getting to a point in your life where you have a lot of good things going on feels awesome, because that alone is a great achievement. A lot of positive things, a lot of opportunities. And then at some point you go, okay, now the harder question, what is the best thing?
Right.
And what is the best thing for this season? And so I think as everybody goes through that process over and over again, you will come to a place, everyone will come to a place where am I willing to give up the thing that I enjoy that gives me value to unlock the next thing?
Right.
And I think the cheap version of this you see is young people job jumping every 2 years to try to get raises. You're like, I think there's a healthy idea in there that they're trying to unlock the next growth potential, but that's obviously not necessarily a positive way to do it all the time. So for me as a leader, it's letting go of things that I'm good at, that are helpful to people, that might even bring them comfort, that might even bring me security, in order to demand of myself that I grow again. And for me, that's letting go of a company that does $10 million a year, has wonderful people, and saying, I'm not going to lead this day to day because we're trying to build a $200 million year business that can change a whole community. It can change the economics of a county, that can really shift change. So I think it's just responding to the call of the next thing and then deciding what you have to let go of to get there. And so not everybody needs to do that. I don't think some people, I think there's a lot of precedent for some, like they're called to different levels and different things, and there's no judgment. So if you're running a company of 10 people and you're the buck stops here, you're like, I'm gonna do this to the day I die. Good for you. That's great. Like, you don't have to give it up. You still should keep growing.
Yeah. How do you challenge yourself, or how do you get around people that challenges you? Because it's kind of like what you're talking about is having bigger thinking versus smaller thinking. Because it's actually more comfortable to stay in the small thinking. And it's kind of like you can get stuck there because you don't realize you are.
There was some study, and also if you get really good at something and you get notoriety for it, why would you want to stop doing that? Right? And you're helping a lot of people. Yeah. Right. So I think there's, all these principles, one of the books that influenced me 20 years ago, like a lot of people, was Robert Kiyosaki's books. And he wrote the Cash Flow Quadrant, which everyone should read. And it's a perspective on commerce. And he outlines in that 4 types of income. There's earned income, where you trade time for money, which is W2. One type. Then there's a specialist, which would be like your doctor, lawyer, where they're still trading time for money, but they're unique in their skill set, which would be like the really optimized buck stops here, like small mindset. Small business. Then there's small business. Oh yeah, small business and specialized are the same, right? And then there's big business, where you create a structure that runs without you. Right. And then there's investment portfolio. And so I think, we did a good job for a lot of time in culture demonizing big business, and there's plenty of reasons to demonize it. But the idea being, you create something bigger than yourself that's not limited by you. If that's the foundational idea, difference between small business, where you're the owner operator with a bunch of people around you, and big business, which is this thing actually is a company of people working together that actually supersedes you. The collective pieces are greater than any individual, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, whatever the expression is. Yeah. Like, if that's truly what it's meant to be, although there's bad ideas of it out there, that's a good thing. And not everybody's meant to lead a big business, but for me, I know that's part of what I'm called to do. So breaking mindsets, what's interesting, people pay a lot of money to get in rooms, to be around people. So there's intentionality in getting into uncomfortable places. Right. I like the term, like, get comfortable being uncomfortable. So get used to pushing yourself into spaces that cause growth. Not reckless, but that form a habit of that. There's there was a study I read a while back that had something to do with education, and it was basically like, why do Asian, I don't know if it was Japanese or Chinese or what Asian country, why are their kids so far ahead in math than like American kids, like on average? And they did like a study of what they did in the classroom. And in the Asian classroom, again, I don't know the specific country or circumstances, those kids spent 40% of their instruction time struggling. And they went over and measured how many minutes of the classroom the American kids spent struggling, and it was less than 5. And so, you know, depending on how you see the world, you might look and say, oh, the American kids aren't struggling, they're winning. But the Asian kids struggle. 40% of their education is on the fringe of struggle, like where they're stretching the brain, where the growth happens. And you compound that over a decade of learning, and they're just
so much further.
There's so much, and they have a capacity, right? Now, you could look at the negative cultural things of all the pressure and all these bad things, but I mean, for the sake of this conversation, it's like they build a muscle for struggle that says, this is where the growth happens, and I want to put myself in that position as much as I can and stretch myself, and I want to get really good at being in there as long as I can. It's like when you work out, it's that last pump, the one that hurts. Like that's supposedly where a lot of the strength, the tear down actually happens for the rebuilding to happen. And if you don't put yourself in that position, you don't really get the benefits. So I think there's a real, like culturally, we've lost this value for you should be doing things that are hard, are hard on you. And you should make your kids do things that are hard on them intentionally. Jocko has this great saying where when it gets hard, he goes, it's really hard. Good. Or, I'm in pain. He goes, good. So that's kind of his catchphrase is like, oh, you're struggling? That's good. Like you should get comfortable saying, this is really hard. I don't know if I'm going to make it. Good. Like,
so I have a question. As you look back at your foundational points in your career, building all these businesses, do you feel like you intentionally sought after the struggle, or do you think they were more circumstantial and then you just said yes to them?
I don't think it's as I think I'm the most intentional I've ever been right now.
Okay.
I don't think I was nearly this thought out for a lot of years. And so what I saw was that my parents made me a slave labor as a kid, which is something that's not done
That's
anymore.
not bad.
I bucked and kicked the whole way, digging ditches, owed my dad every Saturday. So I had this like pounded into me was a work ethic. And I wonder what it looked like from his angle. I got to ask him sometime. Because obviously I thought I was slave labor. He thought I was probably useless. Like just because I pull my kids into work now. And, you know, in my mind, I'm like, they don't know how to work. And in their mind, they're probably like, we're slave labor. You know? So we're trying to teach a work ethic and skills to where when they get asked to do something by someone else, they're not intimidated. So if we say, dig that ditch, they go, I know I can dig that ditch. I know it's going to hurt. I know I can do it. And so it's just a foundational, like, self-reliance factor that was given to me as a kid through a very old school upbringing. And then I played competitive sports most of my youth. And it wasn't like today where you were provided like 5 uniforms. It was very, very basic, but very competitive in San Diego. And so I think competitive team sports where you're pushing yourself physically to the edge over and over and over again, you're losing, you're learning to get back up. Fight again, lose, get back up, fight again, pull together as a team, overcome, over and over and over for a decade or two. That gave me things I didn't realize it was giving me. So then I get into the workforce, and I'm like, I got more in the tank. You know, I'm not intimidated by an 8-hour workday, a 10-hour workday, or whatever is being asked of me. And so the work ethic's there. The mind has been developed. So you're like, I got the tools. And now, you know, to be honest, I got married young. And so I had a need to produce, to provide. And I think for men specifically, I look back sometimes and go, man, if I didn't have to feed 5 kids, like what could I have accomplished? And I go, probably nothing. Because the only reason I got off my butt and did it was because I had to.
There's a lot of purpose.
Correct. So there's like built-in purpose pressure, but it was the right pressure. And so, you know, I think culturally, those are the elements that gave me the opportunity to run really far, really fast and keep going. those aren't praised values. Like if you tell somebody, work your kids really hard, don't provide everything for them, make them buy their own cars, make them pay their own insurance, make them pay their own gas at 16. If you tell them, give them a $30 once a year shoe allowance, that's what I got. Like if you told a parent, this is the formula to build a great kid, I don't think anyone would do it. Like it's not a real popular idea.
Totally. They're like, that's child abuse.
Yeah, it's child abuse. Or what will people think of me as a parent if I don't, make it easy for them. And I'd rather see my kids struggle, fall down, and I help pick them back up while they're in my house than wait, prop them up, and give them a false sense of security, and then let them face that outside my house.
For the first time.
For the first time. Who would ever do that?
A lot of people do that.
I was starting a business, the first one, forming an LLC, hiring employees, and I had friends who were on their parents' cell phone bill. And that's kind of where the diverging paths, I think, can lead. And so I'm not saying everyone should start a business in their 20s and have kids really young like I did, but I do think
those were the external pressures that helped mold you. Yeah,
because the alternative would have been me floating around with a surfboard in Central America for 10 years, like serving myself, which is probably a really glorified idea right now in culture. And you're like, okay, sure, but you got to work it. Everyone's got to work it out. So I think I was given a set of circumstances that led me down a path, and now I realize my children are not given that because my life is different than my father's, and so I have to intentionally create, and that's what this podcast is about. It's how do we intentionally create the opportunities for growth and learning, because they may or may not be forced upon you. You may or may not have resources around you that give them to you. Not everybody had a father who gave them work ethic. Not everybody had a father. So there's so much we can bring back in this conversation. So I think I have a lot of challenges in my own life right now, which is taking things I've created early and trying to shift them into healthier and healthier models. That's a hard one. I have other things we're creating brand new that we have the luxury of starting from like today of what we know, totally different opportunity. I have teenagers coming of age. I have young kids still. We have, leadership within the businesses that are spread out across all of California and beyond. So time has become a real precious asset. When you think about it, like it's becoming very precious. I'm at a point where I'll get on a plane, go somewhere just to spend a couple hours with the right person. I never dreamed I would be doing that. And it just, when you're young, you think I have my whole life, I have forever. And I'm only 40, but things are changing fast, and I can feel it. And so this is the time to go deeper, be more intentional, and make it count. And most of the friends I have, which are the ones I'm going to invite on, all feel that same unction that the next 10 years, whether your kids are leaving the house, whether you're approaching retirement, whether you're taking care of parents, all these things are happening. And you're like, man, we got to make this count. So I invite you to join this podcast as much as you can. We'll keep them under an hour. That's our goal. We'll see. But it's endless, always building. You're going to spend your whole life. It will be spent every minute of every day. Every dollar you ever make will be spent by somebody. So whether that you hand it off to someone else or whether you create passive incomes, like every bit of resource you can generate will go to something. And I think the scripture that a wise man builds business, family, and community means that we have a responsibility for every minute of our life and every bit of resource we create to create those three things. Family, businesses, and communities. And so the cool thing too, when I read that scripture, is God loves all three of those. So we don't have to like segregate the value system of our life. Like it goes across all three. So that's the journey I'm on. And I still stack chairs on Sunday. Keeps you humble. They're like, we need chairs over here. I'm like, I'm good for that. Like, never stop stacking chairs just for fun. So invite you to join us. Casey, any thoughts?
I'm excited to join the
Yeah.
journey, honestly. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for, as much as time is such a precious commodity, putting time into sharing your thoughts and sharing, you and your friends talking through these very important how to live so intentionally as we build our lives.
Yes. That's what we're going to do. We'll see you here every week.
All right.
All right,
Thank
bye.
you.